I just feel like the WMS vendors have lost their minds. Many of them have this idea of expanding their footprint, getting into all this other stuff, and like completely forgot about the fundamentals of like doing stuff on the floor really well and optimizing the floor really well. And they want to be sort of this QuickBooks Online, SaaS solution that attaches to all this other stuff. And I'm like, the industry's lost its mind. And he said, yes, except for Softeon.
All right, so here we are. We're back. The pioneers of WMS. Backed by popular demand by your fan base. Your millions of fans all over the world.
That's right.
And no hats this time.
All right, yeah. I don't do hats because my hair. So
me either. Well, good. So let's get right into some topics here. The first one I want to ask you guys about is something that we talk internally about, but I want to share with kind of the industry, is this thought between enablement and enabling customers to kind of drive their own futures and own what they're doing, versus the trade-offs of kind of a standardized approach. So is there a trade-off, or Mark, I'll start with you. What do you think in terms of enablement versus standard?
Well, I think this is a good story because if you think about when Jim took over as CEO and then he came to me, he obviously knew a lot of what we were doing because Jim and I are, always in touch on things. He knew the IP that we were building. He, when he first proposed the idea and I said, why don't you come and join us? And I said, I just feel like the WMS vendors have lost their minds. Like they just completely forgot how many of them have this idea of expanding their footprint, getting into all this other stuff, and like completely forgot about the fundamentals of like doing stuff on the floor really well and optimizing the floor really well. And they want to be sort of this QuickBooks Online, SaaS solution that attaches to all this other stuff. And I'm like, you guys have, the industry's lost its mind. And he said, yes, except for Softeon, because we have this singular approach to WMS and WES together. And, it might make a really good play for you guys to bring in the technology that you have, meaning us. And, from an enablement perspective, because enablement is like, you do it or you don't do it. You do it a little, it just ticks people off, right? In reality, because you're like, oh, you can go this far and then you stop, right? So I think it's one of those things where you got to take a full step into it. Otherwise you can claim you're doing it, but you're really not doing it. So I think that, like when we first started about this, conversation, when you first started talking to me, I'm like, you were explaining how different Softeon was. And I'm like, it proved out to be true, right?
Yeah, it's very true. I think, if you kind of ask the question why on enablement, I think it's a great question. What's the difference? Why? Why does it really matter? And I think you got to back up to WMS marketplace and the taking the workflow patterns in a physical operation like a warehouse and then mapping them to a digital reality. That's the fundamental difference between us and a QuickBooks, because QuickBooks is a digital representation of a bunch of workflows that aren't really physical anyway, for the most part.
Yeah.
So because of that dynamic, I think that what happens in a warehouse is always looking for that next level of perfect mapping to the operational flow. So when we start talking about enablement, the driver behind it is that unique set of characteristics inside of what's going on in your operation, and you wanting to be able to take a pick or a pack operation that happens dozens times every hour, over a course 24 hours a day, course of 7 days a week, and you take that and you're tuning it for an extra 2 seconds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you do the multiplication, it comes out to be a whole lot. And that is what really drives the enablement, along with the drive of automation subsystems and robotics and, kind of all that other stuff that you're consuming inside of that physical operation. So when we talk about enablement, you're right, because you start with simple things like switches and choices, and that is enablement. That's certainly enablement. But then you have to take it all the way, to a philosophy where you say, I can map the user interface, I can map
Yeah.
the background communication, I can map the workflows to really fit this operation and do it in a way so I can carry it forward.
Yeah, and what's cool about that, or what's interesting about that is, when we talk about enable, we're always talking about the audience, like, because we have this level of saying, "Hey, there's a casual user who just wants to be able to set this rule and then copy it across their network." That's a level. The next level would be somebody who can get in there and say, "Hey, I wanna alter my pick path." Again, that's through a UI and stuff. And then as you get more into the enablement on the IT side, it's codeless integrations and things like that. So I think the important thing about uh, this idea of enablement is who the audience is for, giving them the right tool so they can be effective doing it. And then also, I think what's different about our approach is we have the ability to then copy it across the network, and say, okay, model it here, do it, and then pick these elements of pick routes and integration, and then copy it across to another system. Because what we're hearing more of is that with that whole approach people are trying to take of like QuickBooks Online for your warehouse, is people want to differentiate themselves as a business, right? They want to say, hey, you know what? I'm doing this and I do it really well. It's a differentiator for me. And if we're all homogenized underneath sort of that QuickBooks Online sort of approach to things where you get these set of tools, these set of things, how can you differentiate yourself as a business with that, right? So I think that's the question people are asking.
Yeah. Yeah. He's exactly right. You can't. The answer is you can't. If you just have a QuickBooks approach, then operationally you can't differentiate. And that's because a lot of our customers are 3PLs. They're always looking to differentiate. But even shipper companies come to us and are looking to leverage their supply chain and how they operate as a competitive weapon. And to do that, you it's hard to do that if you just use a kind of a standard. This is the same solution everybody else uses.
Yeah, and I think what ends up being hard is in a world where a lot of people in our industry aren't doing it because they're like, oh, we're a SaaS company and that's the solution. We're a SaaS. We want to get SaaS revenue. We want to do that. And it's just hard to think about how to do enablement at any level other than here you hear the check boxes that you can do, right? What we've done is having a history of, I've been doing implementations for the last 20 years and kind of living in the world of like what implementers need and what people need to be successful. What we've done is said, look, we have an approach to externalize those things so that they can do the individualization, but they're not in our product. They're sort of aside, right? And so our stack allows you to do the scripting things and the UI things and the externalized integrations in a way that allows us to keep our cloud offering stable, but also add sort of to the side of it, right? Which is, I think, is a hard thing to do, right? Because took us a long time to get the architecture all situated correctly for that. It really started in 2015, back, in our Get Us ROI world of trying to figure out how to externalize that. So it's been a long road to figure all that stuff out, but yeah.
Yeah, it is a hard, just to do that generally, to have that kind of level of enablement, ubiquitous across, however you think about it, layers or, depth or span, it's difficult to do it and maintain, version control, maintain
It's tough.
predictability and have an industrial grade solution that's, 7 by 24, 365. It's tough to do. Doesn't make it, any less important to the operation. That's the challenge. So I don't think the other WMS vendors have really lost their minds. I think they've just, maybe in some ways they've said, if we take a little bit more simplistic approach, it's better for us. It is better, but it's not necessarily better for the operation.
Exactly. It's tough. It is, but it's something that I'm obviously super passionate about because that's the way I've been out there working for the last 20 years on the floor. So